Hi everyone, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, wherever you are in the world today. Thank you for joining me once again. This is Amber with Amber Crafting, and I'm back to talk about books. Um, I'm very excited today because it's the last day of school, the last day of homeschooling, and I'm really looking forward to a summer of reading amongst other adventures. I have in front of me today my past book journals and all of their iterations, because I kind of have a surprise reveal at the end, and I wanted to chat a little bit about how I have evolved as a reader. I have always loved to read since I was a child, and I was a very early reader. Even I was reading even before kindergarten, so maybe like four. And since I was a child, I would always be reading something. I would be lugging books back and forth to the library. I was always at the library. And as an adult, I still love to read, and I love encouraging people to read. Um, when I joined the planner community, or actually, maybe not the planning community, but the subset of the planning community is the bullet journaling community, and a subset of the bullet journaling community is the reading journal community. And this is where my mind exploded. I saw so many ideas, people journaling about their books and making these fancy layouts. So in 2021, or maybe actually at the end of 2020, the pandemic year, we were all trying new things. I thought I would try my own hand at doing a bullet journal, and I'll flip through these as I chat a little bit. You'll see that there's just a lot of evolution. There's a lot of things going on. I might be embarrassed by some of these layouts, but it will all, we're going someplace at the end. So I appreciate your patience with me. This is my first book journal, or reading journal. It is a Paper House A5 notebook. I always have these around. I always stock up on these because I just love the simplicity of it. It was a dot grid. I think this was my first dot grid notebook, actually. And after many a YouTube video, many an Instagram post, I sat down and decided to try drawing and putting this together, and here's what I came up with. I did use this through the whole year, and I did actually, I think I did run out of pages, and I had to start my next bullet journal early, like at the end of December. So in that case, it was a success. It was really a first step in where I went as a reader, and I am so grateful to have been able to go through this experience of creating this bullet journal. So this is my title page this year. I think I anticipated filling in the months as I went, but I never did come back to this page. And then we had the index, another page I never went back to. The year at a glance, another page I didn't get back to. Future log, you can see a trend here. The pages I started to go back to were these. I had reading goals. I really enjoyed coloring these in with colored pencil. Actually, this whole journal is done with colored pencil, just with a few exceptions. I did this stamped image and colored it in with colored pencil. I thought I would do a year in pixels, didn't do it. I had a reading challenge, and I believe this was from either the New York Times or one of those websites like BuzzFeed or something, and I did pretty well. The reading challenge is where I think I started to evolve in my reading. I usually tended to go for thrillers. I still do. My mom used to say to me, "Why do you want to read such horrible stories?" And I'm like, "Well, my life is pretty good, and reading is an escape, and that's how you do escape. You read things that don't happen to you. You read about things that you could only imagine." So then I had book recommendations. This filled up pretty quickly. I had a mood board to my to be read list, which was constantly growing. And then this was probably my best spread in the journal, the ubiquitous bookshelf. Every book talker has one, right? And I think I made it up to 100 books here. There's a little over 100 in the shelf, and it was a great reading year. Again, it was still a pandemic year, so we were reading a lot. And then after that, what I had planned to do was like track book clubs. I created a do not finish list. I'm notorious for not finishing books that trigger me in some way. And then I wanted to kind of separate these out by month. So January, there's my planned books to read, and then books that I actually read. So, as I continue to flip through here, I've not looked at this book journal in maybe over a year or more. So these were really amazing books, and taking time to sit down and either color something in or draw something out and journal about it really made me remember the books more. This is another favorite illustration of mine. And then there were some other books where I hated the book, loved the cover, or some other books where I loved the book or was reading so quickly that I couldn't keep up with doing some type of illustration. You can see that starts happening. I'm just more into the story now, right? If it's a beautiful cover, I would recreate it. I have these pages to capture some of the challenges I thought I would participate with. And then really, I think here, February, March, I really get into my stride with how I wanted to run my book journal. And it was just going to be the bread and butter, just the reviews. And then a little bit of experimentation with layouts. And I really, really enjoyed that process. As you can see, this page, this is a tip-in. After a couple of months where I was consistently writing the same type of review based on like the same parameters or the same categories, I created a printable for myself, and I used that printable a couple of times in this journal. So you can see I tip it in here. Here's one book, and here's the second book, little illustration. Another favorite of mine, this was One by One by Ruth Ware. Then we get to the yellow wallpaper. This was another printable that I tipped in. I thought I would illustrate these pages, but I hadn't. I'm one of those people that I will quickly move on. I tend not to feel guilty about a wasted spread or skipping a page in my planner, so you will see that. Here's another tip-in page, another tip-in page. So you can see that this really became a theme or a trend for me, where I'm reading so much now that I started loving to fill in this form. Here's another cover page where I started creating a plan for myself for what I was going to read. I did read those books, or maybe for this month, not so much. Then June, again, same form. I'm just into the reading now, but again, journaling has really helped me to reflect on the book, probably become a better reader, and remember the book more, especially where there were a lot of books that I was reading here that were part of a book club. being in a book club is great because you really get to pick up books that you otherwise wouldn't pick up. And as I said, I'm always a thriller person. Being in a book club, I would always get exposed to things like magical realism, literary fiction, speculative fiction, etc. I really love this layout, like with that note paper. And so if you're not in a book club, I highly recommend doing that if you want to improve your reading. Here were two layouts. I couldn't decide which one to do. So I also wanted to say that if you have a book journal or you want to get into book journaling, I am not too precious with my own book journaling. I really want to read. And at some point on Instagram, and I think that a lot of people will say this, it starts to feel performative, the part about keeping a book journal. And I know that as time had gone on, I would share less on Instagram because of that. I would start to feel like either I'm showing off that I'm reading so much, maybe people are getting jealous that I'm reading so much, or maybe people think that they're feeling bad that they don't read as much as I do. So it really gets into your head with the way that social media was going. And even as I was reading and as I was filling this in, it became more for me and less about kind of like sharing and joining the club of book talkers or booktubers that were also doing a reading journal. So here's the end. I had a couple of ideas for like layouts. Here is where I started to brainstorm on what I could add with my next book journal, which I'll show you in a minute, and then I had like a little illustration and the pen test page and my bullet journal guide, which I never looked at again after I taped it back here. So there's my first book journal. The second book journal is maybe a little bit fancier. It is certainly in a more expensive notebook. Like I said, this was the Paper House notebook, which I love. I've always gone back to the Paper House notebooks because the paper, it is very smooth. I think it handles a lot of media very well. For me, colored pencil was this notebook and pen, and love it. I can't say enough good things. At the beginning of 2022, I thought, okay, the end of my book journal for 2021, it just started looking like a hot mess. I'm saying to myself, because I'm just journaling in here. I'm not really making any beautiful spreads like other people. So I took this Archer and Olive, another great company, like very high quality product, amazing paper. It's that very thick paper, very archival quality notebook. And I thought, let me make another try at doing this book journal. And again, proceeded with setting it up. Here, I really liked, you can see how my evolution was. My lettering was very shaky from the previous year. I don't know what happened here, but this one, I took my time, and I love how these letters look. And this says Reading Life. Then I went with a really gorgeous quote by Mortimer J. Adler that says, in the case of good books, the point is not to see how many of them you can get through, but rather how many can get through to you. This was the year that I was not going to read 100 books. I think I ended up reading 100 books anyway. But whereas this book journal was me trying to, read as much as I could, like be with the cool kids, the evolution of my journaling about books and being really thoughtful about the plot and examining themes carried over into 2022, where I was like, I just want to think about themes. I want to be a more thoughtful reader, and I want to pick books more thoughtfully. And this is how I attempted to go about my year. I don't know why I, went with the bullet journal theme of making the future log, because again, I did not go back to it. This is probably the most beautiful bullet journal type of notebook I will ever do. No regrets, because all of these methodologies and ideas lead me to where I am as a reader today. My first idea was that I wanted to have reading goals, and so I created a spread for reading goal statements. And there were 7 statements. I won't read the whole thing, but I'll give you a gist. I said I wanted to read all the books that I own. I'm buying too many books. I want to read more diverse books, not just the top bestsellers. I want to read more books in other genres. And when I say diverse books, I mean own voices, other ethnicities, other cultures, etc. I said I wanted to read more books in other genres. Again, not just thrillers, not just these horrible books that my mom kept, complaining about. I want to do deep dives and studies on topics. I wanted to, maybe read a historical fiction and then go to like a nonfiction book that explained more of that historical period, so that I could immerse myself in the story more. I want to mark up the books that I own. This was greatly influenced by a book that I read. I should have brought it with me here today. I have it in the other room, but I will leave a link to the book below, because I highly, highly recommend it. I will recommend 2 books if you guys are interested in becoming better readers. The first one is called How to Read a Book. This book is geared towards reading nonfiction, reading manuals, reading any work of nonfiction, and really extracting the information in a way that you can recall it and apply it in your life. And the author of this book recommended annotating your books, writing in the margins. He says that when you read books like this, it's as if you're having a conversation with the author. So if the author says something, write in the margin, I wonder why he said that, or what does he mean by this, or this reminds me of ABC, or perhaps I should look further into XYZ. And that activity is really making you an active reader. So I also realized that when I buy books, I would read them. I would be so careful about not creasing the spine, not folding the corner of the page. You ever see that meme where it says there's people that use bookmarks and then there's monsters? I did not want to be a monster. I wanted to keep my books as pristine as possible. And it was really funny, because one time I had given a couple of books to my girlfriend. I was like, I read these books. I'm not going to read them again. Here, I think that you'd like these books. And she was like, did you even read these books? Because they looked new. And, I was embarrassed. Shouldn't be embarrassed. But I thought, does she think that I didn't read these books? And I realized that, keeping these books in the pristine condition, why? If I'm going to keep them in my library, they should be well loved. If I really loved the book, I should not be concerned about having the book show signs of love, signs of wear, and tear, and marking up, and me having the conversation with the author. And also that keeping the book in the pristine condition came out of this scarcity mindset. Do I feel like I need the book as a safety net? Maybe I'd have to sell it later on. That was a very interesting self-examination. And once I gave myself permission to highlight and annotate and write in the books, I became a much better reader. This was my journey in 2022. So that's the long explanation for this goal. I wanted to mark up my books. The next one was I wanted to examine themes presented in the books. And this was brought about by the second book that I'll recommend to you guys. And this book was called How to Read Literature. It's by, I think, Thomas Foster. If I made a mistake, I'll put an amendment, and I'll link this book below as well, because I saw recently it's available on Amazon Unlimited. This is June, as I'm recording this, June 2023, and it just became available on Amazon Unlimited. And I posted to all my friends that I highly recommended that they borrow this book if they're unlimited subscribers, which I think is a good value if you like to read in volume. And this book explains how in stories there's the the literal, the surface level of what's happening in a story, and then there's the underlying theme. And the underlying theme teaches us about the human condition. If in a Rick Riordan YA novel a protagonist goes on a quest, it's not about the quest, or the journey. Really, he's finding himself. It's a journey of self-discovery, and every quest, that's the purpose of the quest, to learn about yourself. There's a whole bunch of other themes. If there's a vampire, it's really an examination of innocence and innocence lost. It was very interesting, and after I read this book, I came with a newfound knowledge that I could apply to all of the fiction that I was reading, that gave me another layer of enjoyment. And in the case where I didn't enjoy a book, I could more critically analyze it and explain why I didn't, appreciate the author's use of that particular theme. And then the last goal for that year was that I wanted to participate in book clubs and challenges. And again, as I said before, being in a book club, I had been in one book club. This was the year where I wanted to join multiple book clubs to diversify my reading, both in genre and in representation. After creating those reading goal statements, I created a book rating rubric for myself so that I could at least consistently rate my books. I know that for me, a 3-star means like meh, didn't like it, didn't dislike it. For other people, 3 stars might be I liked it, and 4 stars is I loved it, and 5 stars meant I absolutely loved it and made my head explode in joy. So I wanted to at least know for myself what my star rating is, and I adjusted my rubric accordingly. After that, I went into what goes into my book rating rubric, and I started rating books based on different categories. So I would give it a rating for the plot, and I would give it a rating for the characters. I would give it a rating for the pace, the writing, all of these different things. And my hope was that by averaging all these numbers together, I would come up with like a scientific number for what my book ultimate rating was. And having these questions and these prompts for myself as a reference that I could come back to while I was reading the book and while I was writing my journal entry was extremely helpful. And this book rating rubric I still use today. So I'm really excited about having created this for myself. After the rubric, I also created myself, what do I like in a book? What do I go for? What really keeps me reading? What keeps me interested? And I came up with this simple list. Since then, this list has gotten a little bit longer. I'll show you my book rating rubric and my likes and dislikes list today. It's a little bit more thoughtful than this initial list was, but that's how an evolution is. Then I gave myself a list of deal breakers, a list of triggers, because, as I said before, I'm a champion of the DNF. I will tell all my friends, do not waste time reading a book. You are not in school, there's no assigned reading, and if you don't like it, get rid of it so that you can move on to a book that really makes your heart sing. And so I created a list of deal breakers for myself. I will stop reading this book if this situation comes about, and that was also really helpful to me. This list has also gotten longer. I'll show you later on how it evolved. After that, I came across this quote that I really enjoyed, and I had to include it on this page. One of the most subversive institutions in the United States is the public library, by the illustrious Bell Hooks, and I thought it went perfectly with my library books log. So I was keeping track of the books that I borrowed from the library. I was notorious at that time for borrowing the books and then not reading them, letting my TBR, to be read pile just grow and grow and grow. So this was keeping me accountable to read the book and then you return it to the library. As you can see, the DNF, there's a lot of them here. And then when I finished a book, I would put my date, and then I became on top of my library books list and better about taking them out, reading them, and then returning them. After that, this book list is kind of an exercise in shame. It's called What's on My Bookshelf, and this is a list of all the books that I bought that are sitting on my shelf unread. And this goes to one of my goals, to read everything on my shelf. Writing out every title was such an exercise. It was similar to, if any of you have gone through the KonMari activity, where you take everything out and look at it and hold it in your hand and ask you if it sparks joy. And sometimes you feel like, why did I buy this to begin with? And the shame just keeps you from buying anything else for a while. And this was that activity for me, writing out all these lists. It was up to 163 books. Unbelievable. I have read a lot of these books, even though I didn't keep up with the list necessarily. And I'm proud to say that I'm reformed. I'm not as bad as buying books that strike my fancy as often as I used to. I'll tell you another reason for me being better about picking up books. As I was going through this list and reading all of the books on my bookshelf, there were a lot of DNFs, and I was like, wow, am I a terrible book picker? Do I just you pick horrible, people say that they pick horrible partners, and I'm like, I am I'm a bad judge of books. I'm picking up these books and they seem good and they're all duds. So writing out a list of everything that's on your shelf, plus reading a lot of bad books or DNFing a lot of books, will cure you of unnecessarily buying books. If anybody was looking for that advice, there it is. After that, I had a books recommended list. You can see I tried a pen here that didn't really work well for this page. I don't mind because I love this picture. This is a picture of my local bookshop, and this quote may seem a little bit antithetical to what I was just saying about not buying so many books. If you are going to buy books, I recommend you buy local, because local dollars go and influence your community economy, and that is a good thing. So I have this quote: when you shop local, someone does a little happy dance. And this is my local bookshop, which I love. I was just there today, and I'll talk a little bit about that later on. Next, I have the 10 best books of 2021. So this was ranked by the New York Times, and my goal was to read these books. So this was one of the first challenges that I set out for myself in 2022. And did I read any of these books? I never went back to this page, as you can see. And as I'm looking through the list, I did not read a single book from this list. So there you go. Maybe I can, pick this up later. This was another book challenge that I had planned on participating in, and I didn't, unfortunately. Here was another book club that I joined and didn't participate in. Another book club not participated in. Another one. So best laid plans, right, don't always work. But I was reading, and I did read a lot this year. Here was my bookshelfie, and I think that this is always the favorite spread of mine. And I like how I did it across 2 pages instead of doing it on 1 page and then a second page like I did in the first one. Again, I stick with the colored pencil because I really love the blending and how it looks. Even though this paper can really hold up to other type of media, the colored pencil is a favorite, and this is my favorite type of drawing. For somebody that doesn't have that much drawing skill, I think that a bookshelf is very satisfying to do because it's so easy. And you can see I did evolve a little bit. This is just a plain bookshelf, but in this bookshelf I added like the little, what do you call it, the grain. You can see some of the grain in the wood here, and I got fancy with the font here. And this is so enjoyable to do, and I did enjoy filling in these books. Later on, I had a monthly review that I quickly abandoned, and I did also, in addition to having the bookshelf, I thought I would have a list of what I read and the rating, and that quickly went away. So we're seeing a theme here for what works and what doesn't work for me personally. Then I should say all these pages I had set up at the beginning of the year, like really before, maybe even before the year started. This is what I had hoped my reading life would look like. The year hasn't started yet, and I was still creating like these different spreads based on YouTube videos and the Book Talk reading journal community, based on what they were doing and what I think I would have liked to try. This page is not like inspired by anybody. If anything, it's inspired by me reading the book that I just mentioned a little bit earlier, called Read Like a Professor. And I summarized here all of the points that this book discussed so that I could go back and reference them for myself. So, like I said, every trip is a quest, and the quest is about self-discovery. That's the first rule, and it goes through identifying each of the themes that may exist in your reading, and I wanted to have that at my fingertips in my reading journal. And after that, the Read Like a Professor recommended some books to read. Have I read any of these books? Oh, I have. I did read Beowulf after that. I read Alice in Wonderland recently. I read Heart of Darkness, The Canterbury Tales. I didn't go back and update these with his recommendations, but I'm a little less embarrassed now to see that I did follow his advice. And again, a lot of writing. I enjoy writing, so it really wasn't, it was kind of cathartic to write out all of these recommendations and plan to complete them. So there was that list, and then we're going into, now the year has started, and I'm reading and working on my reading life, and here we'll see the monthly spreads. I was breaking it out again monthly. The only thing here was I was making a to-be-read list. I wanted to plan out my reading in advance and try to hit those goals on a month-by-month basis. And for the most part, this strategy worked rather than just kind of picking up the next book willy-nilly after I finished a previous book. And I did want to like color across the days, but I didn't really. I just sometimes I'll pick up a book and it'll be so good that I'll read it in one sitting, or maybe I'll read it over 2 days. So constantly going back to color in the calendar didn't always work for me, and I was fine with just going back to check off the books that I read when I read them. And I was giving myself grace to pick up a book that struck my fancy immediately and read that instead of reading the next book on my to be read list. So I do know myself, and I try to be flexible based on my circumstances at the time. So now I have pretty much abandoned doing any type of fancy artwork, any type of fancy mood boarding, recreating the cover, even taking pictures of the cover. I was just like, I just want to think about the book. I just want to examine the themes. I just want to rate each of the different book characteristics and come up with my rating and think about those. So that is what I'm doing in all of these spreads. And I was keeping it pretty simple with like a little highlight to identify the section, like whether it was a title, a page, etc. And I was using a stencil to try to I was doing a little bit of design with this stencil. It's like a honeycomb, and each of the cells of the honeycomb is the characteristic of the book. So we have plot, character, setting, etc. On the previous page I had different segments. This is kind of like a week's layout, but I used each square for the characteristic of the book, so plot, setting, pace, etc. For this book, I just put my notes about it, so I identified a couple of themes. There were some books where it was part of a book club, and when you get a book club book, sometimes there's questions in the back, and I would answer the questions in the back, and that was always an enjoyable experience. So here you can see, again, it's just journaling, just my thoughts, just my examination of the theme, and I'm experimenting a little bit with the layout of the note itself, but and I'm getting a little bit of design, or a little bit of a seasonal theme with my monthly page that separates the books. But apart from that, that was it. And wouldn't you know that even though there is a lot of design here and like a lot of pretty spreads, I enjoyed using this book journal more. I loved the shark on this book, and I had to draw this book was called Untamed Shore by Sylvia Moreno Garcia, and there was a shark in the book. It was not on the cover, but I thought it would be cool to draw a shark there, because I don't want to give away the plot, but there may have been a shark in the book. And then that is like the evolution of my reading journey. This was a book cover I had to recreate just because it was so visually arresting. Spoiler, I hated the book, but again, sometimes that happens. There was one I did create, another one I did create, but I did let go of that need to create something just for the purpose of creating it, and really I'm just journaling about the books now, and I think that's what a book journal is. So after that, this was 2021, 2022. We're in at the end of 2022. I had run out of space, and I was experimenting with doing a printed book journal. This is when I entered my B6 planner system from last year. And you guys, if you're with me, you know that I have a book journal insert here. So the insert has evolved from the end of the 2022 book journal. Actually, it might have evolved from here when I started doing these tip-ins where it was just a form that I could fill out on the reading, like the book information, what do I look for in literature, notes, and themes. I really enjoyed using this format. So I wanted to create a book journal for myself that I could just journal in monthly. And the first time I did it was for August, so I created an August book journal. So here's my book rating rubric, which you saw in my 2022 journal, where there's questions about the different areas like plot, setting, pace, characters, and then I had my what do I look for while reading? Like, what are my pros and what are my deal breakers? Having that at the beginning of my book journal was key, and I loved that. And then I had like a welcome to November page. This is similar to that front dashboard where I would set some goals for myself. What does my month look like? How can I fit reading into my month this month? How many books do I want to read? And so on and so forth. So after like playing around with the setting, and then I did put some journaling pages. So at the end there would be a book review where I had an area for me to rate the different aspects of the book, characters, plot, etc. Have review notes, moments, quotes, and then a big space for journaling in a book review. I tweaked that layout a little bit for December, where again I have my book rating rubric. I had a lot of additions to things that I look for that I wanted to add to my next iteration of the book rating rubric, and I had a lot more. This is based on like a lot of the books that I was DNFing, as I said. So I came up with a lot of triggers at the end of last year, and so my new book rating rubric has a more fleshed out list of things that I look for and things that I avoid, which is really helpful. And then I had the welcome to November or December, and then the to be read, and I put my to be read here, and then again my pages for journaling. And I thought that I would come up with a new little book journal each month, the way that I come up with a new monthly planner each month. And then I decided I was reading so much and my schedule kind of changed with homeschooling. I wasn't having it as much time to journal as I wanted to, so I thought, let me change that journal. Instead of being monthly, let me make it yearly. And that's what I have now. I have my 2023 year in reading, and I have my reading goals. This is that original list of reading goals from it was from this book where I said I wanted to read everything I own, I want to borrow from the library, I want to annotate books, etc. I typed that up, and that's at the front of my reading journal. So this is really kind of my mission statement for reading. I have a quote. It says, "The quality of your thoughts is determined by the quality of your reading." Bear with me, I'm going to put my light on because I think that it just got cloudy. Okay, thank you for waiting. And that's by James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, which I had done in 2022. So really you can see that everything has an effect on me, and everything is being used. Then I have my new book reading rubric, and I think that this is definitely my favorite page in this journal. I have my updated star rating, whereas 3 last year meant that I liked it, and 4 was I loved it, and 5 was it was amazing. 3 is a meh now, neither like nor dislike. 2 is I disliked it. 1 is I actively hated it, and then we'll go the other way. 4 is I liked it, 5 is I loved it, and this came about after a lot of reading that I did in 2022. I have updated my areas to look at certain things when I'm rating the books, and then I have my updated book rating rubric based on the notes that you saw here. There were a lot of I had a lot of red flags at the end of the year, and I needed to include them. So I highly recommend having this list in your own reading journal if you keep one. It really is like your guiding star, and it really has improved my reading a lot. After that, I would have 4 pages per month with those questions that I showed earlier. How much time am I willing to devote to my reading daily? So just kind of to plan out my month, I gave myself a to be read list, and what I was going for was reading a little bit based on the season. So if, say, January it's the beginning of the year, so there may be a lot of nonfiction, a lot of self-improvement books, maybe thrillers that take place in the winter, or maybe some contemporary books that take place in cold places. And I thought I would enjoy my reading if it was a little bit more thematic in that way. And I did, and that's how I've been approaching my reading this year. At the end of each month, I had wanted to do book statistics. It did become a little bit untenable, like with counting pages and then, dividing and coming up with averages and ratings and things like that. But at the end of the day, it was enough for me to plan out my reading and how often I would read and how many books I would read, make a list of those books I wanted to read based on the theme of the month, and then rating the books at the end. And journaling would be optional for me. If I wanted to journal, I would journal about it. So if it was a book club book where I wanted to answer the questions, I would do that. And I would do it in a separate location so that I would have this book at my fingertips in my everyday carry planner, so that I could refer to it as I'm out and about. I do kind of travel in literary circles, like I'm either at the library or I'm at a book club or at the bookstore, or working with friends that are also reading, and I would refer back to this a lot, especially where I'm getting book recommendations, and I did have a space for book recommendations in the notes pages in the back, and I was keeping track of that way. So that was my evolution of reading, and this kind of came about to inform some products that I had created for those. So for example, my book rating rubric went into, or the thoughts behind my book rating rubric went behind creating some reading journals that were seasonal. And so for example, where I was journaling, I would journal it like in my own seasonal journal and keep that journal entry at home, where like the actual like book tracker came with me in my planner. So I have like a book rating rubric is printed out here. Then there were influences, and I would plan out my reading in the journal, and I really enjoyed those processes. And I had one for nonfiction where I was reading to fulfill a goal. In this journal, for example, my goal was to go through a little bit more of a scholarly lens of feminism, and so that was for the books that I was reading towards that goal and keeping those notes. And then finally, where we are today, kind of like the sneak peek or the sneak preview is a book that I created, that I wrote actually, about expanding your reading. I through my travels, I have tried to like influence, or maybe not consciously try to, but a lot of my family and friends have told me, and I had been surprised to hear that when they say this. They would say, "Oh, like I read more because of you, or I'm a better reader because of you, or like you really influenced me to read." And I was like, "Oh wow, like I wasn't really trying to influence anyone." I try to encourage people, but I was really trying to influence myself. Like I was really just trying to improve myself and improve my practices, and other people had seen it and were influenced positively. I hope that if I influence someone, it's in a positive way. So this book, I did write to help people that wanted to do what I wanted to do right at the beginning of maybe 2021 and 2022, and that was to read different books, to expand their reading practice, let go of all the thrillers and the crime novels and like the terrible stories, and read other things that would positively impact their lives. Read diverse authors, read underrepresented voices. And the way that I would do it was either joining a book club, like I said, or participating in some type of reading challenge. And I thought that the reading challenge is fun because, as you saw in one of my books, I joined all these book clubs, or I planned to participate, and I didn't end up participating. But a challenge you can always do, and you could always challenge yourself, and you can do that at your own pace, wherever you are in life and whatever you have time for. So this book that I created for that end is called Book Bingo. It says expanding your literary horizons one challenge at a time, and it is literally a book of reading challenges posed in the form of a bingo card. I've done research on 50 different genres. They're almost evenly split between fiction and nonfiction. And I tried to keep it as well-rounded as possible, so that someone who, say, I'll use myself as an example again, I love thrillers. I could come in here and say, I really want to expose myself to more stories about refugees and immigrants. Last week, I know we saw that there was a boat that had capsized and 500 people were lost off of the coast of Greece. And I can't imagine what that's like, but I can empathize with those people, especially if I have been exposed to more stories written from that lens. So I have a bingo card for refugees and immigrants. It's on page 197. So I can, is that 197? No, it's page 97, I'm sorry. So I could flip over to that page. Each genre, I have written a bit of background information on that genre, and I have a quote at the top that's from a book that I've read in that category. And then I have this bingo card with 24, so it's 555. You get a free square. So there's 24 challenges that you can potentially do. Not that I'm recommending that anybody, read all of them. Or, if you want to, yes, sure. But you could potentially read 24 books about or by refugees and immigrants and come out of it being more empathetic to the plight of those people. And each of these prompts gives you like a possible novel or a possible story about, with that prompt as a plot device. So, for example, a family escapes war-torn lands, and you can find books like that. And this one, I would say, When Stars Are Scattered, which was actually had the benefit of being a children's book. Well, maybe not children's, like middle grade book, and it was also a graphic novel. So you can see how I do have a bingo card for middle grade books, and I do have a card for graphic novels. So if you read that book, When Stars Are Scattered, you could potentially complete 3 squares on 3 different cards, and that feels like a win. I've also included a quote. Like I said, the book that I read was When Stars Are Scattered, and there's a quote above the card, and it kind of gives you a feel for what you'll find, what types of books you'll see in that genre. And I really, this was a passion project of mine. I am so thrilled to have finished it. I'm thrilled to present it to you guys. I was so honored when the owner of my local bookshop, the Bookmark shop, which I had the illustration for in one of my reading journals, offered to carry the book in her store, and that was just, it was very emotional for me, and it was an amazing accomplishment. Like, I'm so excited. I dropped them off today, and when I came back, I was on such a high that I was like, let me, I'll make a video about this book and what it's about, and talk about my reading journals and how this book has come about. So if you're still here at the end of the video, I appreciate you and your attention and your time. This book is available on Amazon, both as a print copy and as a Kindle version, and also as a little bonus, I did create a digital version of this book as well, and this is what I will be using this summer for my reading journal, because the digital version, there's a little bit more flexibility on adding pages to the books and things like that. So the digital version is available on Etsy. I'll leave links for all of those things below, but I'm so excited and grateful for the opportunity of bringing this book out. I hope that you guys check it out if you enjoy reading as much as I do. If you have any questions about the book, or about reading, or about anything, about my process, please feel free to reach out to me. Thank you again for spending time with me this afternoon. It's afternoon for me, or whatever time it is for you, wherever you are in the world. And have a wonderful rest of the day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye.